some point the dog might start barking, so I might have to let her out into the garden. So she's done it on every podcast so far, so there's no reason why she shouldn't make an appearance today either. Right, Martin, so we're recording there. Again, I appreciate your time coming on this morning and talking to us. How's things?
Yeah, grand, as good as it can be at the minute. Sun's disappeared, and I don't really have to get in my pajamas too much, so not all bad.
Have you been coping with the lockdown and the recent lifting of restrictions? Has that affected you at all?
Yeah, I guess same as a lot of people, ups and downs. I think initially I was in my element. I loved it.
Yeah.
All that pressure we seem to put on ourselves seemed to just instantly lifted, not having to go out and to achieve these external factors that we like to take on. But I seem to have found a little bit more of a state of balance. There was a big dip halfway through, and now I just feel like I've resurfaced a little bit. And
it's a bit different for me actually, because I had initially, when it first all started, I was a little bit, my mind was dancing to the future and thinking all sorts of thoughts and what was going to happen. So I had a little bit of sort of stress and anxiety around it. And then after about 2 weeks, I kind of just that became my new normal. I adapted to it quite quickly. Do you know what I mean? So now I think when we do start that work and start going back to our normal lives, I'll have to start doing with change again, trying to handle another new normal. So
yeah, I know, yeah. And I think for me, I'm going to be trying to continue working a bit more like I have been doing. So I've still been seeing a lot of all my clients and doing some of the other work I do, just doing it from home.
Yeah. And
just in terms of efficiency, it's quite a nice way to work.
Yeah.
However, without the human contact element, which is a shame.
Massive. I know. I put a post out on Instagram yesterday. I also run a jiu-jitsu academy, and it is like a massive part of our human need, isn't it, to have contact? And obviously now that's frowned upon almost and not acceptable. So looking forward to getting back, grabbing people and moving people around and stuff. So
I was trying to. I remember hearing this thing a while ago about the flu pandemic that we went through years ago. Not sure even sure what year it was. Was it sort of the early 20th century?
I think so, yeah.
And even previous pandemics, how that's given it the British people this more standoffish attitude. How we're kind of seen, stereotypically quite a cold nation.
Yeah.
Some like even like historical social distancing has maybe led to these more social changes as well. So it'll be interesting to see how this whether people are going to be like running back into each other's arms, or whether we're going
to be like, whoa.
Yeah.
But we'll find out this weekend when the pubs and the bars open.
Yeah, we'll see.
I know, interesting. So for people who are going to be listening to this or watching us, could you just tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and how you got into it?
Yeah. So when I've listened to other practitioners speak, they've always been on the thing that got them into their role as a nutritional therapist was their own health journey. Maybe they were sick, or they had maybe a child that was ill, and that led them down the road of maybe not feeling that conventional medicine was helpful for them, so they've gone to retrain. For me, it wasn't my own health challenge that really brought me to it, or really the challenges of people around me. So I was kind of doing the exact opposite of this for about 8 years. So I was a full-time musician. I was in a rock band from when I was 18. So I was on about 26. I think I was doing it. Fortunate enough to be doing it full time.
Oh, nice.
And then that kind of just came to an end.
Yeah.
As things do. And we kind of almost the band I was in kind of like spat out at the end of this whole major label, strange record industry thing. So I was kind of trying to decide what to do next. And I had an interest in nutrition. I remember being interested in biology at school, and started reading books about nutrition, about diet, about health in general.
Right.
And realized all the different books had so much contradictory information in.
It's hard to understand what's useful and what's not.
Yeah. Somebody's trying to sell the vegan diet, somebody's telling you to go paleo, and the modern world's stressful enough. You don't need to be worrying about food, that much.
Yeah.
So I mean, at that time as well, I now started sort of experimenting with myself, changing my diet, getting better sleep.
Yeah.
Really trying to address those, those foundations, those foundational pillars of good health.
What sort of things did you start to introduce then to improve the sleep and the health?
Not drinking.
Yeah, it's a massive one, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not. Sometimes we can be looking for this magic pill, or the magic diet, and it's really about trying to make gradual improvement. So really, I think for me, focusing on sleep made a bigger improvement to my overall feeling of wellness, mental and physical, more than changing my diet. But what I kind of found was that as soon as my diet started slipping, everything else started slipping.
Yeah.
So if we're getting amazing sleep, it's very unlikely that we're going to be eating rubbish as well.
People have an idea that if they have a drink before bed, it'll help them sleep better. But am I right in saying that alcohol is just a sedative, isn't it? You're sedated, you're not actually asleep properly.
I mean, it's a very different type of sleep, and even I am quite sensitive to alcohol, so even one drink affects my sleep, and I'll sort of feel the knock-on effects of that for sort of three days. So it's not necessarily for me the worry about other health conditions as a result of drinking. It's just it makes me feel rubbish. So that's reason enough not for me, at least, not to do it. Of
course. So are you teetotal now? You don't drink at all?
Everything but all but teetotal. So maybe 1 or 2 drinks every few months.
Yeah.
But I'm not rushing back to the pub this weekend for sure. So
yeah, we're the same. I enjoy a drink and that, but it'll be like 1 or 2 bottles during the week, and I have drank more during this lockdown, to be honest. I'll be honest with you, but in general, it's 1 or 2 bottles during the week with me bottles of lager, not bottles of wine or anything. bottles of lager with me tea. But I have noticed through drinking a little bit more during the lockdown that it has affected me sleep, and then, like you said, that has a knock-on effect the rest of the day, doesn't it then?
Exactly. Yeah, and it starts to impact actually how we process food. Even if we are eating a healthier food, it's going to have an impact on how we regulate our blood sugar. Right. So blood sugar regulation is really one of the key the key factors to try and modulate and keep in a balanced state for overall health. With alcohol as well. I mean, I'm not sure if there's specific questions you want to kick things off with, but even with alcohol,
I want to really try and get into gut health, to be honest, if that's okay. But I'm fine to carry on with the alcohol.
Yeah,
no, but for everyone, won't it? So
yeah, but I mean, even kind of trying to relate alcohol back to gut health. I mean, when we're talking about alcohol, I guess it's not all equal. There's different types of alcohol that are going to have a different effect. Even the quantity as well. So even maybe starting with the quantity. So there's research indicating that the amount you drink is actually going to start to have a negative impact on the gut lining.
Right.
So when we talk about the gut, there's lots of different. If we start with a bit of like gut 101, like the physiology, like what's going on.
What is included in the gut? When we say gut, what are we talking about?
Yeah. So if we start with the digestive system, is everything from the mouth to your bum. It's that long and winding passage. I thought I lost you for a second. So it's this long and winding passage that we like to separate into different sections and call all different types of wonderful and fancy names.
Yeah.
But really, it's just a hollow tube that runs from one end to the other. We really used to, primarily think, okay, we put food in, we absorb what we need from it, and we get rid of all the waste. Everything that comes out the other end is just waste product. But really, there's a lot of other processes that are going on within there. So primarily, when we're talking about the gut, we're talking about the large intestine. So the last section of the bowel, the colon, and this is where we see the highest amounts of these beneficial microorganisms that are within us. So we're covered in bacteria. They're on every surface of our body, but it's through the digestive system where we really start to see increased numbers.
Is that what people refer to the microbiome?
We
Is
have
that
them in
what
the
people
mouth.
refer to that?
Yeah, so a microbiome is a collection of bacteria. So
Okay.
we have the oral microbiome, so in the mouth. We have the skin microbiome, the lung microbiome,
All right.
and then the gut microbiome. So so the large intestine.
Yeah.
And we've really evolved with these bacteria. So a hand-in-hand symbiotic relationship, and we've really relied on them as much as they rely on us. We give them a nice roof over their head, a nice cozy, damp, smelly environment to live in, which they love.
Right.
And we've also got to feed them the right foods.
Mm-hmm.
We give them that, and then in exchange, they give us a lot of benefits.
Right.
So they start to help to regulate the immune system. They have anti-inflammatory properties. They're there also to help digest food, in particular carbohydrates, so fermentable carbohydrates.
Okay.
And it's this fermentation process that is happening in our gut, which is giving a lot of these beneficial compounds.
Right.
A lot of these compounds also go into circulation. So if we're thinking about even the current pandemic, there's interesting research on how what is going on in our gut is affecting our lung health.
Right.
How molecules we're releasing from the gut can actually travel, stimulate the bone marrow to produce more immune modulating compounds, as well as traveling directly to the lungs where they're going to start to regulate the immune and inflammatory environment in the lungs as well. Which is
so it's fair to say that it's a pretty integral organ. It affects quite a little bit in our body then, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think that definitely within conventional medicine, within the NHS, they're really are fantastic. This is I'm not starting to go down that road of bad mouthing, but we can start to see where we are being divided into component parts. Okay, you've got a gut issue, you go to this person. You've got a blood sugar issue, you go to this person. You've got cancer, you go to see this person. But we're kind of one big soup.
Right.
All these different compounds are traveling through the body in a very interrelated way. And what is happening in the gut is starting to have impacts all throughout the body.
Mm-hmm.
Not just because it's where we absorb food, but because of this interaction between the bacteria, the food, and the host.
Right.
So the bacteria are kind of the middleman.
Okay.
The food comes in, the bacteria do some stuff to it, and then that actually goes is put to use within the human body.
Right. So how do we look to keep that environment healthy for this bacteria then?
Yeah, how do we? So this is the interesting thing, because when they're researching the microbiome or the gut microbiome, we're really trying to figure out what a healthy microbiome looks like.
Right.
Because it could be argued that in the Western world, nobody has a healthy microbiome.
Just through evolution and what we now eat and the processed foods and all that kind of stuff like that.
So when they try and figure out when they look at humans who are living on Earth now, that are living the same way that humans have spent most of the time on the Earth, they start looking at hunter-gatherer tribes.
Yeah.
So in particular, there's a tribe in East Africa called the Hadza tribe, and they've nipped over there, collected some of their poo, started having a look at it. And even when they're looking at different tribal groups around the world, they don't really see the same type of bacteria. So we're not necessarily looking to have X amount of bacteria of certain categories. There's key bacteria that we want to see, but the main indicator of overall gut health is the diversity of the bacteria.
Right. Yeah.
So that basically means you want a really nice broad array of bacteria. This is important because it helps to keep the gut very resilient. And this is kind of a key word. I think I only came across this word about 6 months ago, but it seems to be used quite a lot at the moment.
It's the buzzword at the moment, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Yeah, I kind of jumped on the bandwagon.
Don't worry, we've used it a lot in these episodes that I've been doing.
Have you?
In every conversation, yeah.
Yeah. So it's probably it's been used in the same way when we're thinking about the gut. So as I just use the word, it's about how the gut the more resilient the gut is, the more it's able to cope with environmental stresses, and the more able it is to bounce back.
Right.
When we're talking about diversity, we want a lot of different bacteria to be having crossover in their actions. So one area, for example, is sort of hormone detoxification. So bacteria are responsible for hormone detoxification, potentially to a similar level that the liver is. There's a huge metabolic action an action of detoxification that the gut bacteria take on.
Right.
So say we've got two groups of bacteria and they've got this crossover effect. This group do digestion, this group do hormone detoxification. But in the middle, there's a crossover where they both are responsible for, say, mood regulation.
Yeah.
As soon as we start seeing less diversity, these groups start shrinking. So this redundancy that we've had of this crossover, we start to lose that. So we start to see this dwindling microbiome, which is less able and less resilient.
I was going to bring that up a bit later on, really. I was going to touch on, I only found out recently that a lot of the serotonin is produced in the gut, isn't it? So literally what you eat will affect your mood. And when we talk about mental health, diet, I mean, it might sound like an obvious thing to say, but diet will affect how you feel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, a lot in the gut, we've got two. We kind of call it the second brain. So it's got its own nervous system. It's got its own brain, and it's made.
Sorry to interrupt you, Martin. Have we always referred to it as a second brain, or is that something that's started to be aware of now, that there is so much going on in our gut system and digestional tract that it's now understood to be like a second brain in our body? Is that something new, or is that something that we've always really known about?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think you know, when they were doing autopsies, etc., they would have been aware that there were the same nerves that were lining the gut. So there is literally the same neurons in the gut than we see in the brain. So this helps it to regulate itself without having to communicate back up. So it kind of runs off its own steam to some extent.
Oh, really? Wow.
Some cultures call it the first brain. Now, how often do we feel it in our gut before we actually clock it? You know, before we clock it.
Yeah, I never thought of that. Yeah, I have a gut feeling. That's what I refer to the gut. Yeah. Ah, interesting.
And this is, you know, I think most of the people I work with in clinic have digestive issues and things like IBS, inflammatory bowel diseases, and there's a huge emotional strain on the system as well. Mm-hmm. You know, obviously, any sort of health issue is going to have an impact.
Yeah.
But we're really starting to see that it's actually the imbalances in the gut that are leading to these imbalances in the brain. So we can get into a vicious cycle of where stress can actually imbalance the gut. Mm-hmm. The gut gets to a state of imbalance, and then that can feed back into the brain as well.
Right.
So there's definitely a vicious cycle that can take place. And it's very common for people to start seeing these things after a course of antibiotics. You know, even that digestive issue starting after a course of antibiotics, but extreme anxiety and low mood also as a consequence of that will be
because the antibiotics are destroying the good bacteria in the guts. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, even to go back, I mean, just to kind of talk about like how we've evolved, you know, from these, when we're looking at these old hunter-gatherer tribes, and they've got these really diverse bacteria. You know, since the agricultural revolution, we've started to see all these our diversity being chipped away. Right. You know, instead of having this life where we were really in touch with nature and having a really varied diet, we've gone more to monocropping. Okay, so instantly we've seen a reduction in the diversity.
Yeah.
Industrial revolution, more pollution in the environment. That's going to start having a negative impact. Living in more sanitized environments as well, over cleaning.
Yeah.
Antibiotics. Other medications as well that are commonly used, proton pump inhibitors. So for things like heartburn, they're handed out quite readily, and they have an impact. But then cesarean sections. So we get some bacteria through as in utero as we're developing, But really, the first full-on inoculation of bacteria is as we pass out of the birth canal.
Yeah.
So
is there much studies that I've kind of read a few, not in detail, obviously, because I'm not that academic, but I've read a few kind of studies that would go towards proving that children who are born of cesarean section maybe might have like allergies more often as they grow up, or they may have certain autoimmune deficiency diseases. Is that what the studies are showing and what we know?
Yeah, definitely. So there's, I think it's about 20% increase in rates of atopic conditions.
Right.
So asthma, eczema in particular.
Yeah.
But there seems to be a critical window of around 18 months to 2 years where a lot of this development happens. So even the interesting studies where infants were brought up on a farm during these first years of life, and they had reduced episodes or risk of these atopic conditions.
A low risk.
A lower risk, yeah, because their immune system's being trained.
I suppose it's because like they're messing around in mud, aren't they? And they're in the soil and all of the hair bales, moving everything around and getting these little bacteria on the hands and stuff. And is that making is that making them immune? Is that helping?
It's training the immune system.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're wrestling, your immune system wants something to engage with.
Yeah.
And it's ready to go. That's what it's expecting. Our internal biology can't see outwards.
Right.
So we need to send it the right signals.
Yeah.
Environmental signals, emotional signals, nutritional signals. So all of these inputs, all of these senses that we've got, aren't just impacting us on an emotional level. They're going deeper onto a biological level. Yeah. But they also see if infants aren't brought up on a farm and then they're reintroduced to a farm at a later stage, that doesn't impact the.
All right.
So they're still at a lower. If it doesn't change the risk.
Yeah. So
but
there is that window.
There's a crucial window there. Yeah. But even like there was an interesting study where they were looking at what the parents were washing up with. Like even like if they were reusing the same sponge for ages, that reduced the risk of these conditions as well, rather than just over sanitizing. and how many adverts are there still on TV about sprays that kill 99.9% of bacteria? We've got.
So what do you think about, like, obviously with the pandemic and the coronavirus and that, we're told to be constantly cleaning surfaces, wiping things down, washing our hands to reduce the risk of this virus. But really, I mean, it could have adverse effects maybe years down the line that we are so sanitized and clean. It could make it even worse, couldn't it?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, over sanitization.
Yeah.
And again, we're starting to break down these barriers, these protective barriers that we've got, whether it is the skin or the gut, and that starts to have sort of impacts on the immune system as well.
I always joke with my wife because she says that I'm very rarely ill. And I won't mention the names, but I used to work in a place that wasn't very well cleaned. It wasn't cleaned very often, and the kitchen was absolutely disgusting. We used to cook in this kitchen, and I've probably got a lot of immune to all the bad bacteria are probably going on inside, fighting against me.
Yeah. It sounds like this origin story of some sort of superhero being exposed. But in reality, we're all going to come into contact with this virus. Yeah, I think it's not going to disappear, really until the vaccine comes along. But there's so much we can do to help support the immune system through what we eat. Right.
Do you want to go into a bit of detail about some of those things? That'll be dead helpful to people.
Yeah, of course. So when we're talking about like the digestive system, can separate it into different sections. So in the top half, we've got the mouth, the esophagus, and the stomach. So this is the mechanical breakdown, chewing, digestive enzymes start working away, and then the stomach really is a very acidic environment. So this starts to regulate the whole of the digestive process.
Right.
In the small intestine, this is where we start absorbing most of the vitamins and minerals from the food. So most of the nutrition we want from the food gets absorbed in the small intestine. When we're thinking about how the human diet has evolved, it's the Western diet which is going to start predisposing us to a less healthful state.
All the grains and things like that.
And processed grains in particular. Yeah. So it's the processing of food. We want to think about the processing being the removal of something. Primarily it's fiber. Right. And we used to really think about fiber as something just to help us go to the toilet. But it's got a lot of other roles. One of the ways this is going to have an impact is that this fiber is really what feeds the bacteria. Right. So if we take something like lentils as an example, there's vitamins and minerals in there. We're going to absorb those in the small intestine. Humans don't have the digestive enzymes to break down this remaining fiber. So you can call it fiber, you can call it fermentable carbohydrates. There's another word which is prebiotic fiber as well.
Right, yeah.
So if we think about the bacteria, we call those the probiotics. It's the prebiotics, which is essentially the food for the bacteria.
All right, sorry, explain that again then. So what's the difference between a probiotic and a prebiotic?
Yeah, so the probiotics are essentially the bacteria.
Okay.
So these have I guess a fairly strict definition, but in this context, we'll just call them the bacteria we've got in our gut, the beneficial organisms.
Yeah.
Prebiotics are the food for the bacteria.
Okay.
So the prebiotics are the fibers that we'll get from food that we can't digest, but are the food for our microbiome.
Right. So when you see probiotics and prebiotics in health shops, how do we know which one we should be kind of buying? Should we be buying the bacteria or the food for the bacteria? How would we know?
Yeah. So when we're thinking about trying to build,
I know we're going all over the place here, sorry, but it's when you come up with something. I want to ask you a question about it. So.
I'll get to that. Let me go down this way, and I'll come back round to that one.
Yeah.
So as we go down, and we're feeding these bacteria, the range of fiber in our diet, the different types of fiber in our diet, the more diverse the diet is, that's going to lead to a more diverse microbiome. Okay, so the fibers are going to play a big role. So these are particularly going to be things like lentils, beans, garlic, onions, leeks, Jerusalem artichokes.
Right.
So there's quite a long list of these fermentable fibers, but we're really wanting to get a good variety of foods in. A good rule of thumb is aiming for 40 different plant foods a week. Okay, right. So if that's some people might not be too far from that. Other people, we could have a little bit of a kick up the arse to get to that. But it's the same thing. It's the same thing with the modern world. We can be really used to going to the supermarket and buying the same thing over and over again. So
we're definitely guilty of that. The same meals sort of each night of the week, just for convenience. Yeah. They might be considered healthy, but not necessarily varied. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
And going back to, I guess, evolution, we would have eaten with the seasons. We wouldn't have been exposed to these same foods over and over again, day after day. And this can potentially lead to other intolerances also if we're exposed to the same thing all the time.
Right.
So variety is really important. Herbs and spices come into this as well. Often quite underutilized, but getting a really nice selection of herbs and spices will contribute to that 40 different plant foods per week. Colors as well, the different pigments that we find in foods, the purples, the oranges, the reds.
Yeah, that's another way I've heard it referred to, like a varied diet is a simple way for people to sort of start to introduce that, is just make your plate colourful.
Yeah, eat the rainbow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it doesn't sound very scientific, but I think we are catching up with the research onto why it is helpful.
Yeah.
And again, all of these colours, they're called polyphenols. So these types of bright pigments, these also have start to stimulate different groups of bacteria as well. Mm. So we could call them prebiotic-like foods, so that they're having a general encouraging growth. So the diversity of the diet is going to lead to a more diverse microbiome.
Yeah. Okay.
So when we're thinking about the bacteria that we've got, we really want to feed the ones that we've got. There's two groups of bacteria in our digestive system. There's the residential ones. These are the ones that live here since birth, that we've acquired through the maternal biome from early life exposure. So these are the residential ones. We also eat and consume bacteria through food. So fermented foods, so things like fermented cabbage, like sauerkraut, fermented milk, like kefir. These are bacteria that we'll eat. Same as probiotic capsules as well. They're transient. They pass through us, maybe only last about 20 days.
Right, okay.
So there's two groups. And I think there's this idea that we've got this jar of bacteria, which is our gut. And as soon as we're running low, we'll just take some pills and it'll top it back up again. Yeah. But what we really want to do is actually encourage the growth of all these different types of species of bacteria, which is going to diversify the microbiome.
Okay, I see. I get you.
So prebiotics powders can be very helpful. So if there's things like inulin, phos, galacto-oligosaccharides. There's quite a broad range of different types of prebiotics. So these can be helpful for digestive issues. They can be helpful also in mood regulation as well. There's some interesting research on how it's the prebiotics that are going to have this more systemic effect on, this effect more on regulating the gut-brain axis.
Right.
On how these prebiotics are feeding the bacteria, and then the bacteria release these really good compounds that head off out of the gut and into the rest of the body. So one researcher who all his work is based on the microbiome, and we used to just think if you had an upset tummy, you'd feel it. Okay, you can really locate. I've got digestive issues. I can locate it to this pipe. Right. Digestive issues. So what he says is, the gut isn't like Las Vegas. There's that saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Yeah.
But the gut isn't like that. What happens in the gut, it has for good or bad, consequences elsewhere in the body.
Yeah. It's kind of the body's such an amazing thing, but the idea you just spoke about there, it's kind of like when we talk about mobility and flexibility issues, and if someone's got a bad back, what happens in the back doesn't stay in the back. Sometimes it could be because of you've got bad knees or bad hip flexion or bad ankle dexterity. That could affect lower back pain. So it's the similar thing what you're talking about, isn't it?
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's something that I work on a lot in clinic with people. If they're coming in with digestive issues, the digestive dysfunction might actually be stemming from somewhere else.
Right. And how easy is that to locate then? Or to find out what it actually is?
It depends. So, if we're thinking about something like IBS, which is really an interesting diagnosis, once all other diagnosable conditions have really been ruled out, people are often left with a diagnosis of IBS,
right? Which
some might say is a lack of a diagnosis. We don't really know what's going on. Therefore,
this is what
it's got this collection of symptoms.
Yeah.
And there was a paper last year where it was discussing contributing factors to digestive issues. And the research, I think, highlighted 17 different areas that can be starting to have a knock-on effect and either occur in isolation or start to accumulate and then lead to digestive dysfunction. Right. Simple things like carbohydrate intolerances, so things like lactose, fructose, found in lots of common foods. Those are going to start leading to digestive issues in susceptible people. Vitamin D deficiency, again, thinking about how vitamin D regulates the immune system.
Right. So getting out in the sun, that's vitamin D, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
not much of it at the moment. Yeah. Are you in Manchester?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, you.
Merseyside, St Helens,
okay.
So in between Liverpool and Manchester, but the weather's pretty similar.
So get it when you can, but even when it's cloudy, we're still going to be getting a little bit. So skin exposure is key for that.
That's another thing that I didn't even associate that with the gut and affecting the gut flora and all that.
Yeah, it is a fascinating area. but it's also interesting to figure out what are the interventions that we can do. I'd like, for me, you can get really sucked down the tunnel of research and start learning about all these very specific bacteria and the roles that they have.
Yeah.
But commonly, we need to just go back to basics, and set those firm foundations up. You know, are we getting a really nice variety of colourful fruits and vegetables in the diet?
Mm-hmm.
Are we balancing our stress levels?
Yeah.
So we know elevations in cortisol start increasing inflammation in the gut, start opening up the gut lining to lead to things like leaky gut.
Right.
And once things start leaking into circulation, that's when we start seeing more symptoms appear outside of the digestive system.
So can we go into detail a little bit about some of the conditions then? So you've already mentioned IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, leaky gut. Briefly, because you could probably talk on these for like hours, but briefly, what are them conditions? What's happening inside?
So the conditions sort of outside of the gut that can be linked back to imbalances.
Explain what them conditions are. What's happening when them conditions are taking place?
In the ones I mentioned already.
Yeah. So yeah. IBS and leaky gut. Yeah.
So with IBS, it's there can be a lot of things. I mean, that paper I mentioned, you know, goes into I think exactly 17 different contributing factors that can go into it. So I think this is where what I do as a nutritional therapist is a slightly different approach to what you would get from a GP, where you would go in for a 15-minute consult with your GP, try these pills, let me know. Yeah. But I work with people over a few months to really just try and tease out which of these are the most relevant.
Yeah.
There's other testing that can be done to look into the different types of bacteria. There can be overgrowths of bacteria in the small intestine. So as we go down, the levels of bacteria are increasing. So in the small intestine, we're only meant to have a certain amount, but this can actually increase due to a number of reasons: underactive thyroid, low immune functioning, medication. So again, it's another little segment of what can be contributing to IBS.
Right. Okay.
With this condition, it's called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. We can start seeing, it's been very associated with things like chronic fatigue syndrome.
Right.
So how our energy is being produced, how we're absorbing lots of vitamins and minerals, because the absorption is limited in the small intestine because of this overgrowth.
Right. Yeah.
We start seeing damage to the villi, you know, to these little fingers that stick out around the gut lining that are really important for absorbing nutrients, but also producing digestive enzymes. So there's a lot going on. So with those conditions, you know, that is a really, it's like a series of Russian dolls. You know, you have to unpack it, and it's a process.
Yeah.
But then we start seeing things like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. You know, how imbalances in the gut can lead to this fermentation and we end up sort of producing our own alcohol, which can then start leading to these conditions where we see increased fat deposition in the liver. That we could, you know, would have historically seen in people who were just having a very high alcohol consumption, but that can start impacting the liver.
Yeah, and that fermentation process is just going on inside the body.
Yeah, so when we're talking about fermentation, generally we see it as a beneficial thing. We want there to be a lot of fermentation of these prebiotic fibers. Mm-hmm. So these foods that we eat, we will want a good amount of fermentation to be happening to produce these compounds that the bacteria release. But depending on the balance of these microorganisms, we can start seeing less beneficial compounds being released.
Right, okay. Yeah.
That can start damaging the gut lining. That can start opening up the gut lining.
So is that where you would get leaky gut then? Is that when that would start leaking out of that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm a fan of the diagnosis, leaky gut syndrome, you know, but there are a number of areas that we see where the gut becomes more permeable.
Right.
There are potentially benefits to it opening up and then closing. Can start to engage the immune system a little bit more. Mm-hmm. if there's an invader, but it's this chronic activation, and we start getting little bits of bacterial cell wall that leaks from the gut into the circulation, and it's a compound which is called LPS. Can we swear on this?
Of course you can. Yeah. I had one of the last podcasts that's just gone out. I had Johnny Barber, who's the owner of the Barber men's salons,
Okay.
I mean, he's an Irish guy from Limerick, and he was swearing his head off all the way through.
Right. Anyway, so these things have got LPS, which stands for lipopolysaccharide, but essentially it's a little piece of shit, the LPS.
Right, yeah.
That goes into general circulation and starts to have a more pro-inflammatory response.
So is that a sugar? That's a sugar in it, a saccharide.
Yeah, so it's a cell wall. So it's part
Right.
of the bacterial cell wall, which is as it's moving into general circulation, that's where it starts to have its negative consequences. We see that in studies when they've just injected people with LPS, they get what we call sickness syndrome. So everything that we associate with feeling ill, tired, low mood, just sick. We want to take ourselves away. So this compound, even being taken straight into circulation, is going to give these other symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we can unpack different diagnoses. And if someone's got a broken leg, it's a very clear diagnosis. Okay, you've fallen, your leg's broken. That is what has happened. With something like low mood or anxiety, maybe it's not about thinking about that as a diagnosis, but it's a sign that something else is going on.
Yeah, definitely.
What is the imbalance, and how do we start to support that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even kind of going back to serotonin in the guts. The precursor to serotonin is an amino acid called tryptophan, and it's this which is converted into serotonin. In cases where there's increased inflammation, that tryptophan gets diverted somewhere else.
Yeah.
So we're not actually able to produce that same amount of serotonin, which is going to help regulate mood.
Yeah.
So a lot of it comes back to inflammation, and that's one of the key roles of the microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
So
when you talk about inflammation, because I mean it might sound like an obvious thing to say, but having a high sugar content in your diet, having a lot of sugar, highly processed sugar, that can lead towards this inflammation, can't it?
Yeah, it can. Yeah, so there's different types of inflammation. You know, if you have an injury, your elbow's going to swell, and it's a beneficial response. You know, we do want inflammation. We want there to be an appropriate amount of inflammation to deal with that acute issue. Mm-hmm. It's when it turns into a chronic inflammation, and often in the gut, if somebody's diet is more leaning towards the Western diet, that is just starting to change the environment in the gut.
Right.
We're not getting a lot of these prebiotic fibers. So when we've taken all the fiber out and we've refined the food, white breads, everything, all the white stuff, essentially, all that gets absorbed straight into the small intestine, and there's nothing to go further down. So the bacteria are in the large intestine, just kind of like waiting for this drop of prebiotics. And it doesn't happen. So that starts to change the pH in the colon.
Right.
We want the pH in the colon to be slightly more acidic.
Mm-hmm.
That helps to regulate the environment.
Right.
So for the colon to be really nice and acidic, we need there to be prebiotics.
Okay.
If we're not getting those prebiotics, we get more of a neutral pH, which allows less beneficial bacteria to grow. And then they can start influencing a more pro-inflammatory environment also.
Right, okay. Does that have anything, I'm just literally connected two things here which may not even be connected, but I've been doing quite a little bit of breath work recently, looking at the Wim Hof, looking at buteyko breath work and stuff like that, nasal breathing. Because when these breathing exercises, I don't know if you know a lot about it anyway, but it's about making the body alkaline and reducing the acidity. Does that have anything to do with the gut? Would that affect the gut in any way?
I'm not sure of any studies as such, but when we're talking about pH, there's the different areas of the body, we want them to be different pHs.
All right, so there wouldn't be necessarily one. It doesn't have to be the whole body has to be alkaline, or the whole body would be acidic.
Exactly, yeah. So when we're talking about more about an alkalizing diet, an alkalizing diet is actually going to make the gut more acidic.
Right.
which is a kind of bit of a contradiction. But we want the gut to be a slightly more acidic pH.
Right.
Which is going
to. Suppose if it wasn't acidic, it wouldn't be able to break down the enzymes and stuff, would it? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah. So the pH of the stomach, I think, is between 1 and 2, which is very, very acidic.
Right.
Neutral is 7. By the time we get to the large intestine, it's between 5.8 and 6.5.
Right.
So a lot of this killing stuff happens really high up. So the stomach acid is this first acid bath where any invaders really should get killed off.
Okay.
Which is the reason why things like proton pump inhibitors will lower this, and then maybe there's knock-on effects because we're not as well able to regulate the bacterial environment over there.
I get you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there anything we still don't understand about this digestive system and the gut, or are we pretty much on top of it all?
I don't think we ever will be, to be honest. I think like in terms of the tissues, you know, in terms of what the stomach is doing, in terms of what the small intestine is doing on a physical level, and how nutrients are absorbed, we've got a good understanding of that. But on the microbial level, you know, there's over 1,000 different species we've got, and when we do microbiome testing, do stool testing, we're not looking for, you know, maybe looking for about 30 of them.
Yeah,
it's not a huge amount, and I don't think we'll ever really figure this out within my lifetime to a place where we can use the testing to really. I mean, maybe that's not true. I mean, there's interesting research around microbiome testing indicating how well somebody can regulate their blood sugar. So quite specific diets can be recommended off the back of that.
Right.
So regulating blood sugars can be very helpful for reducing things like diabetes, but also just other metabolic conditions like heart disease. Mm-hmm. Also indicated in neurodegenerative conditions as well, like Alzheimer's.
Right.
So blood sugar regulation also is a really key area where the microbiome is going to come into play.
Yeah. So I didn't even think of the link between that, Alzheimer's and again having the right bacteria and stuff in the gut.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
We start to see changes in the digestive system before we start to see changes in the brain as well. So that's where a lot of it can begin. I
suppose, like, me question whether there's still stuff you don't understand. I suppose if you think of all the millions and trillions of bacteria in your stomach lining, you compare that to the amount of stars and galaxies. It's the same idea in it. We don't know anything. We don't know what's out there in the space, in the galaxies. We have the same idea of the stomach, really. Yeah.
And I think for me that's why I guess I'm trying to manage my time with trying to find research that is clinically relevant. Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of, you know, I guess you can say like, oh, it's interesting knowing about this star which is 50,000 miles away.
Yeah.
But I just need to know where I can fly to.
Yeah. You gotta make it relevant.
Yeah. So it's the same with the gut stuff. Like a lot of research is finding out about very specific bacteria, but the way we modulate those bacteria may well be the same things we would do automatically.
Right. Yeah.
The diverse diet, the really good quality sleep, moderate exercise. And we see there's a spectrum of exercise. Too much intense exercise actually starts to impact the gut in a negative way.
Right.
So there's definitely a sweet spot in the middle where we're wanting to have moderate movement, you know, medium intensity exercise. I see that people who do a lot of marathon running are increased risk of upper respiratory tract issues.
Really?
Because of the impact it starts having on the immune system.
Right. Would that be because of a build-up of inflammation from doing too much exercise? No.
Potentially.
Right.
The increased cortisol as well is going to start dampening the immune response. Starts making the gut a little bit more leaky as well. So it starts opening up these tight junctions a little bit more. I mean, even with that in particular, there was research using prebiotics in reducing the risk of upper respiratory tract issues as well.
Yeah. So do you recommend people take prebiotics?
I recommend prebiotics more than probiotics.
Yeah.
I think both are useful, but in this day and age, I don't think we're getting enough through the diet.
Mm-hmm.
The research is fairly clear how beneficial prebiotics are.
Right. Okay.
For overall health. You know, I think when we're talking about gut health, we're really talking about overall health. You know, how can we support ourselves from the inside out?
Yeah, I suppose it goes back to making, like your point before about making ourselves more resilient. If we can take those prebiotics, not just the gut resilient, but resilient in being immune to colds, diseases, and everything, and like you say, overall well-being.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess one thing to point out with prebiotics as well, it's worth taking a standalone prebiotic. So I've seen a lot of supplement companies saying contains pro and prebiotics in their capsule.
Right.
But the amount in those capsules isn't enough to stimulate the growth of bacteria.
Okay. So just take one, just take a prebiotic rather than a combination of both.
Yeah, probiotic will come in a tub, maybe like a fibre that will dissolve in water.
All right.
And generally be looking to take around a tablespoon a day.
Right, okay.
If someone has digestive issues, maybe bloating, constipation, diarrhea, you would want to start with maybe a quarter of that, because it can be quite aggravating for some people, depending on the type they're taking. So yeah, starting with a more therapeutic dose is important, rather than just taking a very small amount that comes in a well-marketed probiotic supplement.
Yeah, all right. So what about if you are experiencing, so if you eat a certain type of food, or maybe you can't even identify the food, but after a meal, you do feel bloated, you have a hard stomach, and it doesn't really sort of disappear after a few minutes. What sort of things can you advise people to do? Or could it mean they've got some sort of gut issue?
Potentially, yeah. So often one of the main causes of bloating is improper gas production or improper gas breakdown.
Right.
With this fermentation process, we have certain bacteria that produce gas, and then we want certain bacteria to break that gas down. So there's a little production line that goes on.
Right.
With the Western world, it starts to lead to lots of different imbalances. Emotional, biological.
Yeah.
So we can start to see some of these bacteria increasing, so we're getting more gas production, and some of these bacteria decreasing, so we're getting less gas removal.
Right.
So it's this rebalancing that can be very important. So prebiotics can actually be helpful in these conditions. Mm-hmm. So the prebiotics will feed specific groups of bacteria, and they start releasing enzymes to break down antimicrobial compounds to start to rebalance.
Yeah.
Then with probiotics, you know, a decent, well-researched strain of probiotic is a good thing to start with. And then also things like antimicrobial herbs, so things like garlic, oil of oregano. These can be quite a nice way to start to rebalance the microbiome.
But they have to be, going back to the herbs, a lot of people, and I have loads of them in my cupboard, but like freeze-dried herbs, would it be better for them to be fresh?
So a lot of these really would be more as a supplement, so something that's been a bit more concentrated.
Okay, sorry, I understand, yeah.
Garlic cloves can be amazing if people can tolerate them. You know, often it's these, so I guess kind of almost contradicting myself, when we're looking to really feed the gut, we want a lot of prebiotics in, garlic, onions, beans, lentils. Yeah. If someone has digestive issues, a lot of these foods can be really aggravating. And we don't necessarily just want, so temporarily there's diets like the Low Fodmap Diet, which has pros and cons, which is a diet that takes out a lot of these fermentable fibers. Mm-hmm. And then you can reintroduce them sequentially to see if there's a specific trigger that's causing the bloat.
What's it called again? Sorry, what did you refer to the diet as?
The Low Fodmap Diet.
FODMAP, all right.
Yeah. And really what I've stopped using this as much in clinic because it's still not really addressed. It's a short-term measure. It's not a permanent diet for somebody to go on. It's not, you could get symptom free by just not eating anything. It's not, it's not, which works short term, but long term it's not going to be.
Yeah.
No, it's not going to be great. So that can be a good short term strategy. But then going back up to the top of the chain, are we relaxed when we're eating? Being in the fight or flight part of the central nervous system.
Yeah.
Lower stomach acid production.
Yeah.
This is where breathing practice is coming in. Abdominal breathing, making sure we're breathing down from the belly rather from the shallow breaths.
Diaphragm, yeah.
We can do up here. Are we chewing our food properly?
I was going to ask you about that actually. In terms of how fast we eat and how much chewing we do, how much are they important?
Very, yeah. So I think it was Gandhi who said we should drink our food.
Drink our food, yeah. So you chew it that much that it becomes a liquid.
Yeah. So 30 mouthfuls is something that 30 chews per mouthful would be a good.
Yeah.
Something just to be mindful of.
Mm-hmm.
And digestion's a process. We've got if we're putting stuff in the washing machine, we want to do it right. It's a whole. We put the clothes in, we put the detergent in, and it does its thing. Chewing starts to stimulate stomach acid production. It starts to influence the different digestive enzymes that are released further down as well.
Yeah.
So it's this sequence of events, and we've got to start it off in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
This also comes back as well to the times we're eating. Leaving a good amount of time between food also has an impact.
Right.
At least 3 hours between eating. Again, Western world, always a recent type of snack, always something grab and go.
Yeah.
But then with the washing machine analogy, it's like opening the door and chucking more stuff in halfway through a cycle. It never gets a chance to reset.
Yeah, I never thought of it like that. What about eating? I know it's people I've done night shifts in the past. People who are on night shift, you've got to obviously eat through the night. Would that have a detrimental effect? Obviously, it's your body's circadian rhythms. It wants to be asleep. Doesn't necessarily want to be digesting food.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's trying to give our body what it's expecting at the right times of day. Yeah. So yeah, shift work is a really tricky one to navigate. I mean, some people find trying to eat at the same time as if they're working shifts or not can be helpful. If your eating window is between 8 a.m. and 10, 8 and 9, 8 and 8, even just using a 12-hour window, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Yeah.
Sometimes people do find it beneficial to have that cut off at 8 and then almost go through the night just drinking water.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Again, that's not always possible, but it's we need to be sending the right signals. Again, our body doesn't know what's going on. We have to tell it what's going on.
Yeah.
And the way we do that is with sleep, with stress management, with the type of food that we eat.
I suppose it's even more important for anyone doing shift work. Everything else has got to be on point, hasn't it? So like your recovery, your rest.
Yeah.
Your stress levels, everything. Yeah.
It's a really hard thing to battle against. It starts to send everything out of balance. Yeah.
What about? I'm sorry for just keep throwing questions at you, but when we talk about something just pops in my head. How important is or would fasting? Because there's quite a big rise in intermittent fasting. People doing fasts for days at a time. Is that something that could be beneficial for the gut?
So when we're thinking about leaving this nice time, I guess starting with leaving time between meals, what we've got is a house cleaner that comes in.
Yeah.
And when we've not had food in the digestive tract for this time, we get this cleaner that comes in and it starts squeezing any junk out. It's this little peristaltic squeezing mechanism, and evolutionary, we think it was there to get rid of any bits of stone or bone that we may have sort of ingested.
Yeah.
So this starts to really clean out the digestive system and almost help it reset. We also know that we lose about a third of the cells that line the gut lining every day.
Right.
So just through the interaction of food rubbing up against it, a lot of this comes out in the stool. So this time away from food is really important for gut health, but for overall health as well. Eating within a time window is really important also. An 11-hour time window is a good thing to aim for, ideally finishing by 6 p.m.
to then allow the rest of the time for this clean out process to take place. Yeah.
Yeah, and we start seeing almost a rebalancing of the bacteria as well.
Right.
So there's lots of other organisms that start to rebalance.
Yeah.
If we think about,
I'm guilty of through training and only getting home late at night. Sometimes I'll only have like my evening meal at maybe like 8-9 o'clock at night, and that has a knock-on effect, helping me sleep and stuff. Sometimes I'm still wide awake come midnight because I've still got a belly full of food.
Yeah. The modern world's a bugger. It's a real life thing, isn't it? Like we try and cram everything in. We want the evening meal to be family time, so we have the biggest meal of the day. But maybe the body's expecting the biggest meal of the day first thing.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky thing to want to be in the world and live it and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Without just trying to be super strict and do everything you do based on research and science. There's a tricky balance to be found there. So
is fasting something, I know you can't say that you'd recommend it to everyone, but is fasting a good idea maybe for some people?
It seems to be. Yeah. It's not an area that I've delved into a huge amount, but even when we're looking at these, what we call the blue zones around the world, the areas around the world where people have lived the longest.
Yeah.
One of them is off the coast of Greece. So when we think about the Mediterranean diet, it's this type of culture.
Mm-hmm.
Really diverse diet.
Yeah.
Huge. They're eating more colours than the colours in the rainbow each day. It's a really, really vibrant diet. So in this community, they've got the most amount of people who are living over the age of 100. Within that, there's also other factors at play. There's really good social interaction.
Yeah.
People have got a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Good time spent with nature. But interestingly, there's also, on the island, most of the people are Greek Orthodox, which in their religious calendar, they have the most amount of days of religious fasting.
All right.
And I think this is really sort of signifying why we need to do a bit of each. We can calorie restrict, we can restrict certain food groups. Maybe it's the more refined carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And there's definitely an interplay between the two.
Yeah.
A lot of interesting research around fasting, around chemotherapy treatment as well.
All right.
How that increase how both how well how the person responds to treatment, but also in reducing side effects as well.
Yeah.
And obviously, some of these things should really be done under supervision of a practitioner.
Yeah, of course.
But our body is expecting times of feast and times of famine.
Mm.
And again, going back to we eat for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
And getting comfortable with hunger can be quite a tricky thing to do.
It's like, because of, like you said, the modern society, we've got drive-throughs that are open 24 hours. We can access food whenever we want it, can't we? Things that aren't necessarily supposed to be in season, we can always buy them. So maybe it is important that we think about like that. Yeah, let's experience a bit of hunger maybe, and not as soon as we get these feelings, just grab the first thing in the fridge.
And there's always a reason to eat. If we're sad, we're quite creative. If we're sad, we can. If we're happy, we'll eat. If we're celebrating, there's always.
Yeah, definitely.
There's always something. So just pulling that into awareness is quite an important thing. But fasting is quite tricky. It's definitely not for everybody, and depending on their state of health.
Yeah, of course.
But in terms of how beneficial it is, it seems to have a lot of consequences on beneficial impact on what we call all-cause mortality.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about all-cause mortality, it's about anything that you might die of that isn't an accident. So if something reduces all-cause mortality, it reduces the risk of every disease, essentially.
Right, okay.
So this is where things like fasting and sauna use as well can be quite beneficial. Putting a good stress on the body, and then the body reacts in a beneficial way.
Mm-hmm.
And again, fasting is almost like a house cleaning process.
Yeah.
The body
I never thought of it like that before. I never thought of that an analogy, but it's interesting that I like that. Yeah,
like we brush our teeth every day, but we want this sort of cellular cleaning to be going on also.
Yeah, interesting. I know we've covered a lot of stuff there, but if we could just summarise like the top 3 or 5 things that people can do to maybe look after the gut health and the health just in general. And I mean, some of them will be completely obvious, but sometimes we need it actually to be spelled out with us. All right, I'm not getting enough sun. I'm not having less sugar. So could you just summarise maybe 3 to 5 points to help people better gut health?
I mean, I think really the first one isn't, the first few aren't even to do with food. You know, it's really about trying to take care of yourself in every way possible. You know, I think if our actions are coming from that place of trying to look after ourselves, it can be quite a lot easier.
Yeah.
So self-compassion is the first thing. You know, and wanting to look after ourselves in the best way.
Yeah.
Spending time outside, you know, reconnecting with nature, you know, amazing for stress relief. Moderate exercise is really good for bacterial diversity in the gut as well. Thirdly is really getting a good variety of plant foods into the diet, aiming for that 40 different types of vegetables and fruits, nuts, seeds, beans, pulses. Yeah. This isn't necessarily saying meat is bad. I'm definitely in favour of having animal products in the diet, but it depends on the context it's going into. And if we've got this really nice foundation of colours and fibres on the plate, a piece of meat is going into a different environment than a Big Mac would.
Yeah.
So it's the context is important. So the 40 different plant foods a week, and eating the different colours of the rainbow each day. And then limiting all the gut ruiners, you know, all the things that might have an impact on the gut.
Right.
So the sugars, sweets, the delicious chocolates, the high amounts of alcohol. Small amounts of red wine seems to be beneficial for the gut.
Yeah.
What about,
sorry, Martin, what about dark chocolates with a high content of cocoa? Is that any good?
Yeah. So I think there was a study using about 15 grams of proper dark cacao, and how that's going to have a beneficial impact.
Right.
As well as things like green tea, you know, in terms of liquids, fluids, those are going to start increasing the main beneficial bacteria we find in the gut. So I think, what's that? Is that 4? We've got.
Go on, one more.
Self-compassion, outside, good variety of food.
Cut out the bad stuff. Yeah.
Cut out the bad stuff, and it really, I think it is the foundations. Things like sleep. You know. Yeah. We start seeing increased. Reduced diversity, and if somebody's maybe having a less beneficial diet, that might not be so bad if they're sleeping really well. But as soon as the sleep goes out, the potential imbalances, it just adds more fuel to the fire, essentially.
Yeah. The game changer for me was, I don't know if you've watched it, or you probably are aware of the guy anyway, but on Joe Rogan there was a sleep expert called something, I can't remember his first name, but his surname was Walker, and
Matthew Walker. Is it?
Matthew Walker, that's it. Yeah. And a whole 3 hours talking about sleep, and some of the things that they were talking about was unbelievable. All just affected by either lack of sleep or daytime saving hours. Unbelievable.
That was amazing. The 25% alteration in heart attack risk
when the clocks go back.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah,
unbelievable. And then the improvement or the drop when the clocks go back forward. So when people get an extra hour, the reverse effect happened. It was unbelievable. Yeah.
I think that's another sort of toxic thing about the modern world, is that we can sometimes wear these things as a badge of honor. Yeah. Like, I'm so stressed. I've got so much to do.
I know.
I can get by on 5 hours sleep.
I know.
You know,
I read a book. I was reading recently a book called Essentialism, and they were talking about high achievers and high performers. We regularly assume, or we did do, that the stigma was that they don't sleep, they only sleep for 2 hours a night because they're all high productivity, whereas in reality, actually, the Jeff Bezoses, the Zuckerbergs of the world actually do manage to get like 12 hours sleep and a nap as well somewhere in the day. Yeah. So all these modern myths of people doing all-nighters to be productive and try and make money, it's actually not the reality. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's it's a hard thing to fight against. No,
Yeah.
if we've got this thing inbuilt into society of sleep, of laptops, of blue light exposure all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
I
it's
know.
these are all things that can start imbalancing the gut as well.
Yeah.
Even though we've been talking about the gut directly, setting that really firm foundation with all these other environmental factors as well is so important.
Yeah, I know. So just before you go, Martin, have you got any book recommendations for us? It doesn't necessarily have to be on gut or health. Anything interesting that you're reading at the moment, or something that really struck a chord with you?
I got a really good audio book about the Manson murders. This was on Joe Rogan as well. I'm not sure if you listened to this.
I've not listened to that, no.
No, it's a different take on, not a different take. It's a journalist who has researched the Charles Manson murders for I think about 15, 20 years.
Right.
And how Charles Manson may have, what was already known to the FBI and potentially used in some sort of.
I think I've heard him talk about that actually. Yeah, he was known to the CIA in that one, but they just let him crack on and do what he wanted.
Yeah, and it kind of talks a bit about these mind alteration experiments they were doing with LSD in the 60s.
Right.
How they trying to almost like brainwashing experiments and things. Anyway, fascinating stuff. Really of just. I think for so much of the time I've got my head buried in like clinical work. I just like to go off and it's
like we talked about before. You've got to have a break, haven't you, and a rest and recuperate, and whether that means totally switching off from one thing and listening to something completely different, that's going to benefit and help as well, isn't it?
Yeah, massively. Yeah. So it's about balance.
Definitely, yeah. And just before we go, Martin, where can people get in contact with you, or where can they access to you if they want any more information or any help with any issues they've got going on?
Yeah, so my website's martincohennutrition.co.uk. So there's lots of articles on there about gut-related things. You can also book a free call with me if you're having any digestive issues. Happy to have a chat, see how we can get you feeling a bit better. I'm also on Instagram, Martin Cohen Nutrition. So I try and post reasonably regularly with recipes, gut stuff, pictures of fields, etc. So yeah, just all those sorts of things. Yeah.
Cool. Brilliant. Well, that was really interesting. That was fascinating. I appreciate the time talking to us. But brilliant stuff. Great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's always good to. There's so many questions that can pop up as well. So just try and.
I apologise for just throwing things at you when they appeared.
No, it's good. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on.
No worries, Martin. Thanks very much, mate.
Right, take care.
Cheers. Take care. Thank you. Bye bye.